The first hints of dawn brushed Sunspear's crenellated walls with blush-rose light, warming the sandstone towers that rose like spears above the roiling southern sea. Prince Oberyn Martell stood barefoot on a narrow balcony. A thin sheet of silk knotted loosely about his waist, salt wind tugging at his unbound hair. Somewhere beyond the palace's inner court, children were already drilling with spears beneath the violet-leafed bone-white trees Prince Lewin had brought from long ago. Their high-pitched cries echoed faintly through arched colonnades and across tiled roofs, mingling with the muted growl of breakers clawing the jetty. Oberyn inhaled, tasting morning on his tongue, tamarind and brine, heat and promise, and let it settle into his lungs like brandy. He had dreamt of Elia again, not the placid dreams of memory that left him bittersweet but resigned. Tonight she had come in iron and scarlet, her voice the hiss of a blood-soaked oath. "Viper," she whispered, "my vengeance is unfinished and my children still cry out beneath the mountain's helm. The prince that was promised lies hidden in northern snow. Seek him, brother, for the whole realm will burn if you hesitate." Oberyn woke with the image of Rhaegar's infant son, Jon, if the spider's whispers were true, glimmering like a dawn star behind his eyes. It was enough. Excuses dried on his tongue. Vengeance for Elia required more than the death of Gregor Clegane. It demanded truth, and perhaps an ally whose veins carried the same dragon's fire that once lit Rhaegar's melancholy gaze. A soft throat-clearing pulled him from reverie. Elia Sand leaned in the carved doorway, dark eyes half-shadowed by tumbling hair. The silk robe barely clung to her shoulders, orange as a setting sun. "You look as though you mean to sail before the tide turns," she murmured, voice still husky with sleep. "I do," Oberyn replied. "By noon. A swift galley and 6 of the sand snakes to accompany me. I sail for Old Town first, then White Harbor, and finally the Wall if the gods allow." Elia crossed the balcony and slid an arm around his waist. "You chase a ghost. A dragon egg," he countered gently. "Rhaegar's child lives, Elia, and if the rumors hold, he wears black atop the wall. Jon Snow, the bastard of Winterfell, though bastardy may be the smallest truth in him. If he is the trueborn son of Rhaegar and Lyanna, he is not only Elia's nephew by marriage, he is the key to justice that does not end in ashes." His mouth tightened. "I would see him, judge for myself, and offer craft and steel to whatever destiny pulls him northward." Elia traced the faint scar above his heart. "And if your vision misleads? If Jon Snow is only some stark whelp with solemn eyes and frozen veins? Then I return with snow on my boots and stories of a boy who deserved more than the cold," Oberyn said, pressing a kiss to her brow. "But if he is Rhaegar's son, I will not let him stand alone against a realm that devoured his father, his cousin, and his aunt." He paused. "I will need your counsel here. Keep Dorne steady, quell the whispers, and watch Myrcella. She will need a friend." Elia whispered something that might have been prayer or curse, but let him go. Oberyn dressed swiftly in a close-fitting tunic the color of fresh blood, cinched by a black leather girdle stamped with the blazing sun and spear. By midday, the sea snail cut northward along the broken arm, her crimson sails taut with desert wind. Oberyn stood at the prow, salt spray beating on his cheeks, and allowed himself a single satisfied breath. Vengeance, long the rhythm of his pulse, had a new cadence now, one that beat in time with distant winter. Far to the north, atop the ice-glazed ramparts of Castle Black, Jon Snow shivered against a wind that could flay skin from bone. Ghost stood sentinel beside him, crimson eyes narrowing at the curtain of pale sky that heralded yet another storm roiling down from the Frostfangs. The direwolf's hackles ruffled in the breeze, ears twitching. "Easy," Jon murmured, gloved hand sinking into thick white fur. He too felt the storm's malice, though he could not name its source. Snow had come early this autumn, piling knee-deep against the wall's shadow. Ravens screeched restless warnings each dawn, and in his dreams, Jon walked a silent forest of black glass trees beneath a moon that bled. "Winter is not the only enemy," a woman of mist and stars whispered. "Fire must answer ice or all men perish." Jon had little time for riddles. The Night's Watch teetered on the brink of ruin. A thin harvest at Molestown left their larders meager. Wildling raids grew bolder along the new gift. Worse still, Ser Aliser's quiet resentment curdled into open defiance after Jon's election. The Lord Commander could not show weakness. Yet every decision seemed to bleed brothers from their ranks. 5 to Chilblains on the Shadow Tower Road, 3 to a ranging vanished without trace, 2 more to quarrels that ended in bare steel. Jon felt each loss as though a finger severed. He refused to let despair root. Each dawn he trained with Donal Noy's remaining lads, drilling shield walls and spear thrusts, for he suspected that before Winter's heart unclenched, the Watch would face foes more terrible than wights or giants. He did not know what form those terrors might take, only that the raven's nightly croaks of darkness comes rang true as steel. A horn blast split the morning hush, one long, one short. Jon straightened. Visitors? Few dared the King's Road this late in the year. Ghost bounded down the steps 3 at a time. Jon followed, black cloak snapping like a ragged sail. The prodigious gates groaned open to reveal a column of horsemen striding into shadow. 6 lithe women clad in shades of fire-kissed sand, half-veiled, wielding spears tipped with rippled steel. At their head rode a slim man garbed in red and gold scales, spear across his back like a scorpion's tail. Only when he dismounted, moving with liquid grace despite the biting cold, did Jon recognize the subtle menace in his smile. "I am Oberyn Nimmerose Martell, Prince of Dorne," the stranger said, voice warm as arbor gold. "Though some know me as the Red Viper, I come seeking Jon Snow, Lord Commander of the Night's Watch." Jon stepped forward, boots crunching on hoarfrost. "You have found him," Oberyn assessed Jon. Black curls dusted with snow, gray eyes haunted yet unbowed, Longclaw's direwolf pommel silvered by ice. A flicker of something akin to satisfaction touched the prince's lips. "Well met, Jon Snow. I bring wine, letters, and questions, and perhaps an answer to your own unspoken ones." Jon frowned, wary. "The Watch thanks you for supplies, but questions are costlier than wine in the north. A fair price, but my coin is heavy." Oberyn's gaze swept the courtyard. Lean faces, tattered cloaks, the smell of boiled turnips. "Your brothers do not seem flush with plenty," he signaled. The sand snakes unpacked crates. Olives steeped in orange blossom, wheels of goat cheese, sacks of barley, casks of Dornish red. Jon's men gathered, incredulous murmurs rippling through their ranks. Oberyn turned back. Hospitality offered, hospitality accepted. "Now, shall we talk somewhere warmer than this frozen hell?" Jon nodded, though suspicion gnawed him. As they crossed the yard, he noted the prince's unconcealed spear. Steel was scarce in Dorne. Poison, not blade, was Oberyn's legend. A man who walked into a fortress carrying his reputation like a banner feared little. That alone made Jon uneasy. In the Lord Commander's chambers, a fire crackled, though its warmth felt frail against the chill seeping from stone. Jon poured 2 cups of mulled ale. Oberyn declined, uncorking a slender glass flask instead. He filled a single goblet, deep crimson liquid catching firelight. "Taste if you dare." Jon shook his head. "I commanded my brothers never to drink another's wine unless we brewed it ourselves. The Wall has known too many betrayals." "Wise," Oberyn allowed, sipping with relish. "Perhaps we begin with small truths. You are Ned Stark's bastard. But tell me, was Lady Lyanna your mother?" Jon's heart hammered. "No one living knows that answer but my father, and Lord Eddard is ashes beneath Winterfell." "Not no one. Rhaegar Targaryen might have known." Oberyn leaned forward, voice softening. "I loved my sister Elia. She bore Rhaegar 2 children. Then he stole away Lyanna Stark. I have always wondered why. The chronicles claim he crowned her queen of love and beauty for simple fancy, but men do not burn kingdoms for fancy alone." Jon stared at the flames. "I do not possess dragon's blood, if that is your query." Yet a memory pricked. Cold tunnels beneath the wall where he'd felt warmth in Ghost's eyes and fire in his veins. He swallowed. "What do you truly want, Prince Oberyn. Justice, Oberyn said plainly. For Elia, for her children, for the realm Robert left bleeding in pursuit of a crown. And I believe that justice may be forged with the hammer of the north and the anvil of Dorne. You, Jon Snow, stand at a crossroads between ice and dragonflame. I wish to know which road you will walk. Jon met his gaze, searching for guile behind the amber irises. He found only pain honed into purpose. The Watch takes no part in Southron wars. Oberyn arched a brow. Yet the wars come north all the same. The Lannisters grow fat on coin and fear. The Tyrells tighten their roses' thorns around King's Landing. And far beyond this wall, something stirs that will make the Game of Thrones seem a child's pursuit. He lifted his wine. I offer alliance, not against any one house, but against oblivion itself. Stand with me when the dawn demands heroes, and I will bring Dorne's spears to your cause. Jon exhaled slowly. You would break centuries of Dornish seclusion on a dream? On my sister's voice, Oberyn corrected gently. And on yours, when you decide to speak it. A knock interrupted. Maester Aemon entered, parchment in hand, eyes cloudy yet sharp. Forgive me, Lord Commander, but a raven from White Harbor. Lord Manderly grants passage for a Prince of Dorne bound for the Wall, and begs safe escort to Winterfell thereafter. The old man's blind gaze drifted toward the visitor. I heard your name once, in another life, Prince Oberyn, if memory serves. Your memory serves perfectly, Maester, Oberyn said, bowing. He turned to Jon. A path forms. Accept my company, and we depart for Winterfell when you are able. There we might unearth truths buried with your father. Jon weighed the offer as he might a Valyrian blade. Perfect balance, yet capable of severing more than it protected. We ride at first light, he said at last. On one condition, you and your warriors obey the Night's Watch while under my command. Oberyn smiled, sharp as a scorpion's sting. I shall be your humble guest. Jon did not believe that for a heartbeat. Yet something in the prince's fervor, the same blaze he'd glimpsed in Rhaegar's songs within Old Nan's tales, ignited a coal in Jon's chest. A coal he had banked for years beneath duty's frost. If Oberyn carried vengeance like a spear, Jon carried purpose like a shield. Defend the realms of men. Perhaps their paths were not so divergent. 5 days later, the column left Castle Black as dawn bled crimson across the sky. Jon rode at the head, ghost loping beside his gelding. Oberyn flanked him, sand snakes fanning out like desert falcons charting new sky. Behind them trudged 6 black brothers, Dolorous Ed muttering about frozen viper bites, Gren grinning stupidly at the nearest spear maiden, PYP marveling that a prince wore no cloak in such cold. They made East Watch by the second night, trading news for fresh horses. Sailors spoke of dead things washing ashore, pale limbs tangled in kelp, lips purple with cold. Jon felt Oberyn's gaze upon him. This is the darkness I warned of. From Eastwatch they turned inland, cutting through haunted forest. Snow hung thick on bough and branch, everywhere the hush of a world holding its breath. Jon's dreams grew vivid. Red vipers coiling around a white wolf while a woman in tears and iron whispered, blood must bind ice and dune, or night shall swallow all. He woke each dawn with sweat freezing on his neck. Oberyn did not press him. He rode in silence, eyes scanning Treeline, as though searching for shadows between branches. When they camped, he drilled with spear and dagger, twin blades flashing like fireflies against the snow. The sand snakes sparred likewise, their laughter clashing with steel. Jon's brothers watched, enthralled and uneasy. They dance as if death were music, Ed muttered. On the 7th day they reached Queenscrown, abandoned beneath a shroud of frost. They took shelter in the ruined tower. By firelight, Oberyn unfurled parchments, letters from sailors, spies, even a septon in Volantis. Each spoke of Daenerys Targaryen across the narrow sea. Dragons grown large, unsullied marching beneath black and red banners, slave cities in revolt. The last dragon princess gathers storm, Oberyn said. If Jon is the dragon prince, and Daenerys the dragon queen, perhaps fire will answer ice sooner than men think. Jon studied the inked map. Dragons or no, my vows are to the realm, not to thrones. Yet thrones decide the fate of the realm, Oberyn countered. He tapped bravos. Iron Bank gold funds Lannister debts. Gold feeds armies that might march north while you stand alone against winter. His gaze softened. Help me expose the truth of your birth and Elia's murder. Then we will see whether dragons fly to war or to salvation. Jon touched Longclaw's pommel. I will see justice done, but not at the cost of my honor. Honor is a spear, useless if never thrust, Oberyn replied. But wield it wisely and you may slay monsters no sword can touch. Jon did not sleep after that. The tower's stones felt like ice on his back as he stared into darkness and listened to Ghost pacing below. Dawn broke gray and bitter. They rode south again. At the edge of the Wolfswood, ravens gathered in unnatural numbers, black wings blotting branches. The air tasted of iron. Ghost growled, fur bristling. A snow-heavy hush enveloped them. Not even wind dared whisper. PYP's horse screamed first, ripped sideways into the trees by something white and silent. The woods erupted whites, bone-pale, eyes blue as frozen flame, pouring from the firs. Jon barked orders, drawing Longclaw. Oberyn spun, spear a streak of red fire, shouting commands in Rhoynish. Sand snakes formed a circle around Maester Aemon's mule. Steel met ice-stiff flesh. Blades rang like bells. Jon fought beside Oberyn, the prince's movements hypnotic. Stab, pivot, slice, poison-laced blades severing tendon and spine. But for every corpse felled, two more advanced. PYP fell beneath clawed hands. Gren hauled him up, but his throat gaped crimson. Dolorous Ed muttered prayers through gritted teeth as he hewed a white skull. A chill deeper than winter washed over them. An other stepped onto the trail, armor shimmering like moonlight on black water. It raised a sword of pale crystal. Ice smoke bled from the blade. Jon squared his shoulders, Longclaw raised. Before they clashed, Oberyn slid between, spear poised. Dragonglass? He asked. Valyrian, Jon answered. Dragonglass shards would shatter on that thing. Oberyn grinned. Then let us test ancient steel. The other moved with impossible speed, sword aflash. Jon parried. Shock numbed his arms. Oberyn darted wide, spear lancing toward the creature's flank. But frost-armored flesh defied normal steel. The prince fainted, drawing the ice blade downward. Jon seized the opening. Longclaw cleaved through the other's torso in a scream of shattering crystals. The creature collapsed into wind-blown shards. Around them, the remaining whites stiffened, then crumbled to dust. Silence returned, broken only by labored breaths and Gren's sobs as he knelt over PYP. Snow fluttered, painting crimson wounds white. Oberyn wiped spearhead on fallen firs, expression unreadable. Jon knelt beside PYP, closing his friend's dimming eyes. He looked up, blood on his gloves. You saw them. Now you understand what the Watch faces. Oberyn met his gaze. Ido. And the realm is unprepared. Jon rose, shoulders heavy. Then vengeance must wait. The realm must be warned. Oberyn's jaw clenched. Vengeance and warning need not be foes. Elia's murderer sits the Hand's chair beside a boy king ruled by lions. The Lannisters will never heed your call. But Dorne is ready to march, and mayhaps the north as well, if your sister sits safely in Winterfell. My sister, Jon whispered. Oberyn extended a scroll sealed with a wolf's head. A letter from Lady Sansa Stark, carried through White Harbor by a trusted smuggler. She writes in secret beneath Lannister guards, begging aid. He paused. You are not only Lord Commander, you are blood of the wolf. If we save Winterfell, we may forge a bulwark of ice and sand against the storm. Jon accepted the scroll, fingers trembling. He broke the seal. Sansa's words blurred in moon-dim light. If there is any justice in the world, come home, Jon. I am a hostage to lions, and our home groans beneath Boltons and reek. Father's ghost walks these halls. Winter is coming, but we are alone. Jon folded the letter. Ghost whined softly. "Ride with me," Oberyn said. "To Winterfell, then to Sunspear if need be, and finally to King's Landing. Together we will avenge Elia, rescue your kin, and warn the Iron Throne that Winter's true enemy does not kneel to crimson lions or golden roses." Jon looked to the eastern sky, where dawn's first light bled red as spilled wine. "We ride," he agreed. In that instant a pact forged, ice and fire, viper and wolf, shaped not by banners but by blood, vengeance, and the fragile hope that two men burdened by ghosts might save a realm too blind to see its doom. They reached White Harbor on the 23rd night, sails snapping beneath a sky thick with storm clouds. Lord Manderley greeted them with wary courtesy, his great belly cinched in a wolf-fastened belt. News of whites brought terror, rumors of dragons brought disbelief. Yet when ghosts snarled at every shadow and the sand snakes recounted the battle in the wolfswood with grim precision, the Lord's ruddy face paled. Within Merman's court, plans unfurled like maps across a dampwood table. Manderley pledged ships to ferry Northmen from the Rills and Flint's Finger. Oberyn promised 20,000 Dornish spears to march once snows melted enough to cross the neck. Jon dictated letters for Maester Mott to copy, warnings to the Eyrie, to Riverrun, even to old Walder Frey. "They must all know," he said, "and they must believe before it's too late." Oberyn sealed each missive with the sun and spear beside the direwolf. "Ice and fire bound together," he mused, watching molten wax cool. "Appropriate, no?" Jon's eyes were hollow from sleepless nights. "If the realm ignores us, we stand alone. Then alone we stand." Oberyn's smile held iron. "And the realm will follow when winter's teeth close around their cities." Midwinter broke early, savage and relentless. Snowdrifts swallowed roads. Ravens perished in flight. Men vanished on short patrols. Yet under Jon's command, White Harbor became a camp of purpose. Smithies forged dragonglass arrowheads from obsidian Oberyn had bargained in Old Town. Shipwrights reinforced hulls with ironwood. Spears drilled on frozen keys beneath banners of sun and wolf. Nightly, Jon stood atop the city walls, gazing northward. Ghost pressed against his thigh. Somewhere beyond dead fields and silent forests, the wall still towered, but its watchmen were F.E.W., and winter's tide rose higher each moon. He wondered if the brothers he left could hold until spring. Oberyn joined him often, silent until stars salted the sky. One night he said, "A wise woman in Norvos once told me, the sword's worth is neither forged nor tempered by the smith's hammer alone, but by the fire it faces in battle. You, Jon Snow, are tempered by fire and ice both. Take heart. When steel sings, your voice shall guide the chorus." Jon managed a faint smile. "You speak in riddles nearly as well as Melisandre." "I prefer my riddles tipped with poison," Oberyn quipped, yet his gaze softened. "Tell me, do you believe the gods have any mercy left for this world?" "I know only that men must make their own mercy," Jon replied, looking south where distant lights winked beyond the bight. "Perhaps fishermen, perhaps wildling fires, perhaps specters. And if we fail, there will be no songs left to blame the gods." Oberyn nodded. "Then let us not fail." By the first full moon of the new year, ravens arrived in a flutter of broken hopes. Riverrun answered, Edmure Tully bound by Lannister siege, powerless. The Vale stayed silent. The Aerys' airy halls closed behind Arryn pride. The twins answered only with a mocking verse penned by some Six Rivers bard in Frey service. Jon burned the parchment. Yet a single missive bore unexpected promise. From Queen Daenerys Targaryen herself, carried by a narrow-winged goshawk. She wrote of dragons grown mighty, of cities freed, of a throne made of swords that should serve the realm, not rule it through fear. She welcomed news of a brother's son, and vowed to sail when her armies had healed and her dragons were ready. Oberyn's eyes gleamed as he read. "Dragons will answer winter, or burn it brighter," Jon cautioned. He sealed the queen's letter away. At last a thaw crept into the air, more suggestion than warmth. Ice cracked on the harbor. Scouts reported Bolton banners torn by wind atop Winterfell's walls. Jon's jaw locked. "We march." Manderley's banners, trident green mermen, joined Karstark black sunbursts, Serwyn's silver bucks, Mander's towered bears. Oberyn's sand snakes led a sleek advance guard of Dornish outriders, their copper skin blazing against snow. They rode swift and silent, eyes keen for signs of wights or worse. Jon rode at the vanguard beside Oberyn. Ghost trotted ahead, muzzle low. On the third day, they discovered 2 flayed corpses nailed to a tree, Karstark deserters, skin torn from living flesh. Jon's knuckles whitened around Longclaw. "Ramsay," he growled. Oberyn eyed the grisly sigil with disgust. "He plays at terror. Let us teach him what true terror is." Snow fell like ash as they closed on Winterfell. Within sight of broken walls, Jon raised a horn and blew 3 notes: challenge, mourning, vengeance. Bolton sentries jeered from above, until Sand Snake's arrows felled them like wheat. That night, Jon walked the lines, speaking to each soldier, speaking of lost kin, of duty, of the dawn beyond darkness. Oberyn addressed the Dornish ranks in lilting Rhoynish, promising blood paid in silver and a northern night warmed by victory's flames. Torches bobbed in the gloom like fireflies. Breath steamed like dragon smoke. At dawn's first pale flush, horns roared. Northmen surged, shields locked. Dornish spears darted through gaps, nimble and precise. Ramsay's dogs howled, lunging. Arrows whistled. Steel rang on steel. Jon hewed a path toward the gate, Ghost at his side, white fangs flashing crimson. Oberyn slipped through chaos, spear licking out to hamstring horse and man alike. Snow churned to slush beneath trampling boots and spilt blood. Manderly's knights breached the western wall where old mortar crumbled. Flames leapt. Inside, Winterfell's great courtyard became a vortex of death. Jon fought like the old kings of winter reborn, Longclaw cleaving through flayed men. He caught sight of Ramsay atop the battlements, bow in hand, grin feral. An arrow streaked, Ghost yelped and tumbled. Rage blotted the world red. Jon stormed the stairs, crushing foes beneath his fury. Yet before he reached Ramsay, Oberyn appeared, spear-tip dripping. "Your prey," he said, stepping aside. Ramsay loosed another arrow, but Oberyn's spear flicked, knocking it wide. Jon advanced. "For Winterfell," he hissed. The duel was brutal, Ramsay's knives flashing wicked arcs. Jon blocked, countered, felt steel bite his arm, drove Longclaw through Ramsay's gut. The bastard's grin faltered, life draining like summer wine spilled on snow. Cheers erupted from below. Ravens scattered skyward in panic swirls. Winterfell was free. In the Godswood's still heart, Jon knelt beneath the heart tree, red sap bleeding like tears down white bark. Sansa emerged from shadows, cloak of gray will clutch tight. She stared at him with eyes both stranger and sister. Without a word, Jon rose and folded her into his arms. She trembled, not with fear but release. "Home," she whispered. "At last." Oberyn watched from a respectful distance. He noted the weirwood's carved face, mouth twisted in silent scream, branches bent like arms reaching. In its horror he read the realm's wound, old, deep, festering. He vowed the wound would close before winter's end, or he would die carving out the rot. Letters flew from Winterfell, one to Daenerys naming Bolton downfall and entreating alliance, one to Dornish lords ordering their march north, one to King's Landing demanding Cersei release Sansa's handmaidens and confess her crimes against Elia Martell and House Stark. Cersei's reply came swift and mocking, sealed in crimson wax. She scoffed at Jon's legitimacy, denied Elia's rape, and called Oberyn a snake whose venom would never reach the Iron Throne. She offered instead pardons for all if Jon bent the knee. Jon burned the letter in the braziers of Winterfell's hall. Sparks curled upward, golden and furious. "So be it," he said. "We ride south when the snows part." Oberyn smiled, satisfaction laced with steel. "The game begins, and this time the board is ours." Yet even as banners unfurled and swords were sharpened, the wind beyond the wall shifted. A howl rose, vast, mournful, hollow as eternity. White winds whirled across abandoned keeps. And in the heart of that blizzard, blue fires flickered, hungering. Long before spring, the red viper and the white wolf would discover that vengeance and duty were but twin fangs of the same beast. And as they led ice-bound Northmen and sun-kissed Dornishmen south toward dragon-forged destiny, the dead marched silently behind them, an endless tide no mortal army could stem without fire bright enough to scorch the very sky. But on that frigid night, within ancient gray walls warmed by new hope, two unlikely brothers in arms shared mulled wine and cautious laughter, their burdens briefly lightened by the knowledge that together, perhaps, they could bind the world's wounds with steel, courage, and the memory of those who had bled before them. The road ahead would demand more than any oath or spear could offer. Yet the red viper and the white wolf stood ready, side by side, to challenge winter and crown alike, for Elia, for Lyanna, and for all the living who still dared dream of dawn. The fires that burned on Winterfell's ramparts in celebration of Bolton defeat had smoldered to ash, but the scent of smoke lingered in every courtyard arch and Godwood tract, winding through the castle's marrow like a half-remembered hymn. Spring remained a rumor whispered by blackbirds on sunless mornings. Snow still draped rooftops in sluggish swells, and the breath of every living creature curled into the air like restless spirits denied the grave. Yet beneath that pallid shroud the castle breathed again, stone awakening, halls echoing with the hammering of rebuilders, cellars yawning to swallow cartloads of grain hauled from Manderley storehouses. Where flayed men once hung, bright banners of direwolf white and orange-gold sun twined together, rippling defiantly against the cutting wind. Jon Snow took each dawn atop the battlements, Longclaw sheathed at his hip, cloak snapping, eyes traveling the horizon in slow, measured sweeps. At his side Ghost limped, arrow wound roughly stitched, bandaged in linen steeped with maester's herbs, yet still paced as though the wall itself required his vigilance. Jon would kneel often to check the stitches, murmuring quiet thanks that the direwolf's ribs had turned steel aside. The creature's crimson gaze never wavered from the north, as though some spectral dread still slithered beneath frozen drifts. By the third morning after victory, the castle teemed with northern lords summoned by raven or rumor. Tall Torrhen Karstark stood beside burly Galbart Glover, both pledging swords with solemn oaths. Young Lyanna Mormont arrived on a shaggy pony, issuing commands to knights thrice her age until they obeyed as if she were Aegon the Conqueror reborn. Spearmen from the Rills, archers from the Barrowlands, and grim spears of House Umber marched through the gate in ragged columns, gaunt but resolute. They bowed first to Jon, Lord Commander no longer, but the wolf returned, then to Sansa, who greeted each banner with poise that reminded many of her mother. And always they spared wary glances for the prince in red leather who lounged near the cracked weirwood archway, dark eyes glittering with unreadable mirth. Oberyn Martell spent daylight sparring in the yard, barefoot on frost-slick flagstones, challenging any willing warrior. The sand snakes circled him in spinning patterns, spear hafts rasping across steel shields, laughter pealing when northern men slipped on ice or flinched at feints. Far from sowing disdain, the displays kindled respect. Men who fought the cold learned quickly to appreciate fire. Of evenings Jon convened a council in the great hall, its high-vaulted rafters hung with evergreen garlands to mask the stink of dried blood. At the long table sat Wyman Manderley, whose scarlet doublet strained against his girth, Lady Mormont armed with ink-black bear-claw gauntlets, Septa Alice of Barrowton, Lord Serwyn, and representatives of every village that could still field 20 spears. Oberyn reclined nearby, boots propped upon a bench, sand-colored cloak draped like languid flame. The talk was grim. Scouts riding the King's Road reported Lannister patrols massing around the twins, Frey banners drawn tight. Greyjoy reavers prowled the stony shorelines, torching small fishing hamlets. Yet each night's final subject returned like a lodestone to steel: the dead. "How many walk?" Lord Glover asked. Fingers nodded. "You fought them in the Wolfswood, Lord Snow. Could 1,000 men hold against their number?" Jon's voice carried flint. 1,000 men with dragon glass and Valyrian steel might hold a day. But the dead do not tire. They do not break ranks. They don't flee when cut. They keep coming until every living thing is slain or fled. That is the enemy our realm faces. Silence pooled, broken only by the hiss of braziers. Wyman Manderley dabbed sweat from his brow. Then we must secure allies beyond the north. My ravens fly to every southern lord still willing to read parchment sealed by wolf and sun. Few will answer, but we need only a few with open eyes. Oberyn lifted his cup. Eyes close when wine is sweet and debts are heavy. We must thrust the truth under their noses like a poisoned blade. When they smell their own death, they will listen. Lyanna Mormont pounded fist to table. Let us take their noses then. March south with our dead whites shackled in chains. Show the Iron Throne the monsters they ignore. The risk is grave, Jon countered. But you see true. Sight shakes men more than words. Yet we cannot spare soldiers to escort such nightmares while the wall sits unwatched. It was Sansa who found middle ground. She rose, skirts whispering, copper hair shining. Our allies yet untested may be swayed by the testimony of a trusted figure. Someone born of the South, respected in the courts, yet beyond Lannister strings. Her clear gaze settled on Oberyn. Prince Martell, will Dorne's word to southern lords carry weight if bound in blood and ice? Oberyn set aside his cup. Dorne's word will carry daggers. I intend to place those daggers at Queen Cersei's throat, and at any lords who balks at truth. But such threats ring hollow without proof. Bring me an other's severed hand that still writhes in daylight, and I shall present it in the throne room before the Iron Throne's swords and swear on my sister's bones. He flashed a thin smile. And I will poison those who think it trickery. Manderley blanched. Lyanna smirked. Jon rubbed temples. We will capture a white hand, he agreed. But first we must fortify Winterfell. If the dead break south before summer's end, this castle must hold. Weeks slid by measured in hammerstrokes and raven cries. Snowmelt carved rivulets through Wintertown as blacksmiths stoked forges day and night. Harlan Holt, chief of miners from the Norrie Hills, arrived with sledges of glittering obsidian quarried from the Skirling Pass. Under Oberyn's instruction, Dornish tinkers filed the stones into wicked arrowheads and slim charcoal black spear points. Children of the Gift, cheeks red with chill, tied bundles of dragonglass daggers with twine and carried them to the armory. By torchlight in the Great Hall, Donal Noy's successor, brawny Rorik Pike, set to fixing edges on the meager stock of ancestral blades. During these nights, Jon walked the crypts beneath Winterfell, lantern held high to illuminate dusty kings. He sought communion, guidance, some whisper from Eddard's statue or Lyanna's stone likeness. Yet only silence answered, until one midnight gust extinguished his candle. Darkness swallowed him whole, and in it, a memory surfaced unbidden. Ned's hand steady on his shoulder the day they'd parted for the wall. Promise me. Then another voice overlapped. Soft, Dornish lilted. Oberyn's words. Blood must bind ice and dune. Jon relit the lantern with shaking flint. The flame's first flare revealed something he had never seen. A bundle tucked behind Lyanna's feet, wrapped in cracked gray leather, bound with twine faded to iron brown. He unwrapped it on the stone floor. Within lay a brittle parchment bearing Ned's precise hand. Months earlier, Jon might have trembled at breaking his father's seal. Now he read with calm dread while the crypt air lapped at his cheeks like winterwolf breath. My son, if the day ever comes when duty demands you know the truth of your birth, seek this letter in the silence where your mother rests. Ned recounted the Tower of Joy, the promise whispered by dying Lyanna, the babe wrapped in blood-stained sheets. Aegon Targaryen, trueborn son of Rhaegar and Lyanna, hidden beneath the name Jon Snow. Forgive me the lie that protected you. Wield it no longer if it threatens the realm's salvation. Jon's pulses hammered his skull. For a long while he knelt, head bowed, as though at prayer. Then he folded the letter and rose, bearing with him not pride but crushing inevitability. He found Sansa alone in their mother's solar, poring over supply ledgers. She glanced up, brows knit. Jon closed the door and handed her the letter. She read in silence, a hand pressed to her mouth. Candlelight glimmered off unshed tears. When she finished, she met his gaze, voice steady. You are the dragon's heir. "I am still of Ned Stark's blood," he answered hoarsely. "Still of Winterfell. Now you are also fire," she whispered, touching the dire wolf brooch at his collar. "We will forge ice and fire into steel strong enough to break the night." The revelation could not stay between siblings. Jon presented the parchment at council, laying it atop the map of Westeros. Lords muttered. Maester Coleman adjusted spectacles. Lady Mormont sputtered, "Seven hells, we have a dragon king for a cousin." Yet Oberyn alone studied Jon with expression unreadable, some mix of triumph, agony, and vindication. When voices settled, Jon clasped the table's edge. "I am still sworn to defend the realms of men. This truth changes nothing except my ability to unite those realms." A Targaryen claim may sway Stormlords still loyal to Robert's memory once they learn I was reared by Ned Stark and stand with the North. It may stir the Reach, where Rhaegar's honor lives in old songs. Most of all, it may strengthen the bond with Daenerys and her dragons. "Dragons melt snow," Oberyn murmured, "but they also melt stone. If you ride them without caution, you may burn allies as quickly as foes." "I will ride nothing blindly." Jon surveyed those gathered. "Here is our course." Oberyn sails south to Sunspear bearing a White's hand for proof. He rallies Dorne, demands passage through the Reach, and meets the Targaryen queen at Dragonstone. I ride east with a small host, north of the Wall, capture a White, return it to White Harbor. Wyman Manderley sails the White and myself to Dragonstone to stand beside Prince Oberyn. Sansa governs Winterfell in our stead until I return. Gasps answered. Maester Coleman coughed. "My lord, north of the Wall so soon." "I know its dangers," Jon cut, "but the longer we wait, the higher the snow falls and the stronger the dead grow." To his credit, Wyman only sighed and ordered the city's best carpenters to reinforce his fattest cog. Oberyn rose, swirling his crimson cloak. "It seems my road is chosen. I will depart within 2 days." He paused at Jon's shoulder. "Meet me at Dragonstone, Aegon Snow. Together we shall wake dragons, or bury lions in ash." 2 evenings later, the sea snail left White Harbor under moonless sky, hull laden with Dornish bottles and one black iron chest packed with snow to keep a severed, fetter-bound hand from rotting. In the stern stood Oberyn, Illyria's fine-spun scarf tied about his wrist, eyes fixed southward. The sand snakes lounged on deck, wagering which Lannister would soil his breeches first at sight of undead flesh. Wind carried them swift as any dream. Within hours, the glow of the harbor was a faint amber smudge against vast dark. At Winterfell, Jon gathered his ranging party. Tormund Giantsbane, who had slipped past the wall again with stories of refugees hiding in caves. Dolorous Ed, Beric Dondarrion returned from Brotherhood wanderings, and Theon Greyjoy, gaunt yet determined to atone. They carried dragonglass axes, torches soaked in oil, and hearts heavy with purpose. Sansa watched from the gatehouse as they rode, ghostly under half-lit skies. She clasped Jon's sealed letters, one to Daenerys, pledging alliance and family, one to Cersei, demanding safe release of northern captives, though they knew the reply already. Her silver wolf brooch glinted moonlight as she lifted it to her lips in silent blessing. Before dawn they reached Molestown ruins, then pressed into frost-hushed forest where pine sap froze to amber beads. 2 days passed without sign of whites, but smoke plumes revealed wildling camps. Mothers clutched starving babes, men clutched rusty spears. At Jon's signal, Tormund parleyed, offering passage south through Eastwatch and Sanctuary beyond the Gift. Desperation forged quick bargains. Scores joined their march, famished but furious survivors who had seen dead shadows stalking tree lines. On the 4th night, they made a ring fort of felled saplings beside a frozen tarn. Snow fell in silence. Beric prayed by torch, his one good eye reflecting flame. Theon tended Ghost's bandage with trembling hands. Jon took first watch, listening to the wind slip through branches like distant whispers. He felt the wall's absence keenly, as though part of him remained grafted to its ancient ice. But any path forward meant leaving old vows behind and embracing harsher ones. In deepest night, Ghost snarled. Snow rippled at Treeline, forms pale as bleached bone. Torches flared. The dead advanced. Battle roared in the dark. Dragonglass cracked skulls. Barrack's flaming sword whistled arcs of orange light. Jon hacked limbs in relentless rhythm, all thought compressed into blade strike and breath. Amid the carnage he spied a white massive as an aurochs, an umber giant, frost-rimed beard trailing icicles. It barreled through the line, crushing a wildling fighter beneath frozen heft. Jon threw himself aside, rolled, and plunged Longclaw through its heel. The giant stumbled. Theon's axe severed its kneecap. Ghost leapt at its throat. Together they felled it with a thunderous crash that shook snow from ancient pines. When dawn bled gray across the carnage, 20 wildlings lay still, but one prize remained. A jerking hand torn from a wight's forearm, fingers clawing at empty air. Ed crammed it into a leather satchel packed with salt, cinched tight. "May the seven damn me," he muttered. "This may be the most miserable baggage in all creation." They turned south, escorting the ragged column to Eastwatch. There, Cotter Pike cursed Jon for leaving, then ordered a longboat crew to ferry them down the coast. Even sea ice could not gouge the resolve now hardening behind Jon's ribs. Far below, the sea snail reached Kingsgrave on Dorne's stony coast. Oberyn rode hard to Sunspear, banners snapping behind. Word of his arrival spread like prairie fire. In the water gardens he convened a conclave of Dornish lords. Dark-skinned Blackmonts, copper-haired Corgyles, lean Tolans bearing ghost moon sigils. Before them Oberyn opened the chest. Gasps filled the scented air as the withered hand twitched through rising mist. Many crossed themselves, some retched. When silence fell, Oberyn spoke not of vengeance but of survival. The Night's Watch saved Dorne once before, though few remember Sunspear's gratitude. Now winter comes for us all. Break our spears on the marches if you will. The storm will still devour our children. I will sail at once to Dragonstone, pledge our spears to a king of ice and a queen of fire. All lords who follow shall earn a place in dawn's light. Those who refuse will huddle meekly beneath sands turned to glass by dragonflame. Even the proudest princes could not ignore the hands writhing. Ravens left Sunspear within the hour, summoning banners. Shipyards at Plankytown rang through the night. Oberyn himself boarded a swift Pentoshi caravel named Stormkiss. Elia kissed him on the pier, salt tears mingling with sea spray, wished him piercing poisons and softer beds. At his side climbed Tyene, Nymeria, and Sarella, 3 sand snakes chosen for subtlety over steel, and the chest with its grim relic sealed in iron clasps. By moonrise Dorne's coast receded, a black scrawl against silver water. Oberyn faced northeast, thinking of a boy raised in snow whom fate named Dragon. Jon's party reached White Harbor as spring's first true thaw broke the ice in lazy clumps. Refugees filled the docks, wildlings and small folk alike, crowding Manderley warehouses. Wyman greeted Jon with booming relief. In the great chamber of New Castle, the white hand clattered on a table, still gnashing at air though rot-blackened flesh. Maester Mott nearly collapsed. Rorik Pike forged a chain of iron links to wrap the thing, sealed by a dragonglass shard hammered like a nail through palm to table. The entire hall stank of old death. 5 days later, Jon boarded the Leviathan, Manderley's fattest cog, its belly rocking with barrels of smoked cod and casks of dark ale. With him sailed Davos Seaworth, summoned by Sansa's raven from Sisterton, now sworn to aid the North's cause. Tormund refused the ship, preferring to stay inland rallying free folk to Winterfell's defense. Theon limped up the gangplank, carrying the letter Ned Stark had written to Robb before his march south. Relic of another life, perhaps a talisman against weakness. Gray-green seas carried them south along the narrow sea. Flying fish leapt like silver knives. Gulls screamed overhead. Davos guided the cog with steady seamanship, while Jon kept to the forecastle, eyes drawn inexorably skyward, searching for any hint of wings against cloud. On their 5th night, he glimpsed reflected fire flickering on waves far ahead. Camp torches on Dragonstone's black cliffs perhaps, or something more. Stormkiss arrived first, docking below Dragonmont's smoking peak under banners of sun and spear. The island fortress bristled with unsullied on the walls, their spiked helms stark beneath overcast sky. When Oberyn strode across the causeway, chest borne by 4 oarsmen, the gates opened to reveal a woman in slate and crimson dress, silver hair whipped by wind. Daenerys Targaryen's violet gaze fixed on him with unreadable weight. Inside the cavernous throne room, lit by sputtering braziers accentuating carved dragons, Oberyn knelt, then flicked open the chest. The white hand lunged, rattling chains. Grey Worm stepped forward, spear lowered. Missandei gasped. Daenerys inhaled, horror warring with awe. Oberyn spoke. "Your Grace, this is the enemy of life itself. Jon Snow rides now with proof enough to rouse the world. He is, by his father's final decree, Aegon Targaryen, your blood. I have sworn Dorne's spears to him and to you." Daenerys's expression shattered, reformed like steel cooling. "My brother's child?" she whispered, stepping closer. The hand snapped, jaws clicking. She turned to an unsullied captain. "Burn it." Torches seared it to ash. The stink of singed rot filled the room. Daenerys looked back to Oberyn. "We ride for the mainland at once. Dragonfire will answer this darkness, and justice shall answer those who usurped my house." Oberyn smiled thinly. "First burn the dead, then pluck the lion." On the morrow her dragons wheeled overhead in a deafening roar of wings and flame. Black sails unfurled along the horizon. Martell Dromons, Tyrell swan-proud ships whose captains bent knee after receiving word of whites. Even a Tyroshi war galley bribed with fat Dornish gold. At Dragonstone's docks, Jon's Leviathan anchored just as Drogon landed with thunderous impact, wings folding like night's curtain. Jon stepped onto the pier amid tongues of swirling ash, meeting Daenerys's wide eyes across the tumult. The first words he uttered were not of kingship, nor of war. He said simply, "The realm needs you." She studied him, black curls whipping, shadow of direwolf pommel glinting at his side. Perhaps she saw Rhaegar's resolve tempered by stark stoicism. Perhaps she saw hope she had not felt since the day she birthed dragons in fire. Either way, she nodded. That night, in the map chamber where Stannis once brooded, Daenerys, Jon, Oberyn, and Tyrion Lannister, new hand clad in sober black, pored over carved valleys and wooden markers. Tyrion listened to accounts of wights, fingers drumming. When the white hand's chains hit stone with dull clang, he paled, drained a goblet of arbor gold, and said, "We have until the snows swallow the neck, no more. The Lannisters will not march north unless forced. But a dragon above the red keep might loosen Cersei's bowels enough to bargain, or she will burn, and so will her army." "Burning King's Landing kills innocent thousands," Jon argued, knuckles white on map's edge. Tyrion's eyes clouded. "Yes, well, perhaps start with a demonstration. Blackwater rushes warehouses, the Lion's Gate, not the city proper. Ash and terror travel quickly." Daenerys set her palm on the wooden carving of King's Landing. "I will not be queen of charred corpses. We parley first. Then, if Cersei refuses truce to fight the dead, we take the capital by storm but spare the populace, open gates from within. I have allies among the small folk who remember what it is to live under Tyrell gardens, not Lannister yokes." Oberyn touched a carved sun at Sunspear. "The Dornish fleet strikes at the harbors, blocks retreat, forces Cersei into the city's walls. Meanwhile, Jon leads a vanguard up the King's Road, northern levies, Vale Knights if Lord Arryn heeds sense. They encamp at the Trident, ready to press once dragons roar overhead." Jon absorbed the plan. "My place is north," he said beside Oberyn. "But if winning the throne forces Cersei's armies to join us or perish, then it serves the realm." "You will have to reveal your name," Tyrion cautioned. "Once the world hears you are Aegon, factions will sprout like mushrooms after rain. Some for you, some for Daenerys, some for chaos."
Jon met Daenerys Kees. Isaac Notruna.
"If my claim divides our allies, I will renounce it. But the proof may sway doubters to heed our warning of the dead." Daenerys' stare did not waver. "A dragon does not renounce its birthright lightly. Yet if you would yield for the living's sake, you are the king my brother wished to be." She turned to the others. Begin preparations. We sail on the next full tide. Dragons soared over the narrow sea toward the mouth of Blackwater Bay. Their shadows flickered across foam-white crests. Below, the Allied fleet stretched in a black arc. Martell red sails, stark direwolf on white canvas. Davos's stag sigil resurrected on a single ship crewed by Stormlanders eager for a righteous fight. Tyrion guided the lead vessel. Grey Worm commanded unsullied ranks arrayed on deck, shields gleaming like midnight seas. Cersei's scouts saw nothing until Drogon's roar cracked skies and the bay's mouth filled with a firestorm that turned midday glare to molten gold. Bells tolled in the city. Gold cloaks scrambled. On the ramparts, Jaime Lannister watched Dragonfire leap across the water and whispered, "So it begins." South of the city, among vineyards along the Rose Road, Jon's host advanced. 40,000 spears from the north and Riverlands, flanked by Vale Knights in sky-blue cloaks. Ghost led the vanguard, healed and silent as snowfall. At Jon's side rode Brienne of Tarth, sword Oathkeeper radiant in sun, and Arya, face half-shadow beneath a hood, needle strapped to her belt. As the sun dipped blood-red, word spread. The Red Keep's western tower burned, wildfire caches in the shipyards ignited, and the Iron Fleet lay in smoldering ruin. But no white flag rose. Instead, scorpions pivoted along the walls, not at dragons but at the throngs beyond, testament to Cersei's resolve to slit her own throat before kneeling. Jon convened his captains beneath an oak grown gnarled in river silt. Strategy threads unwound. Grey Worm to breach the Mudgate, Arya to infiltrate the Red Keep through forgotten catacombs shown by Varys, Dornish skirmishers to scale the Kingswood palisades and cut supply lines. All to begin at dawn, if Cersei refused the final parley offered by Daenerys. That final parley took place on the broad plain of the Blackwater Fields. A single table stood between camps. At one end, Daenerys in black scaled cloak, Jon beside her dressed in white fur. At the other, Cersei in burnished crimson plates, Jaime at her shoulder, Qyburn flitting like a gaunt crow. Oberyn watched from behind Daenerys's ranks, eyes narrowed to slits. Cersei's gaze flicked to Jon. So the bastard of Winterfell now claims to be a dragon prince. How many names must one man wear to hide treason? Jon placed the sealed bundle on the table. Qyburn flinched as the hand writhed. "There is no treason in living," Jon said. "This is your true enemy. March your armies north. We will fight together, then decide thrones." Cersei's lip curled. "The north is snow and ghosts. I guard the realm of men in its heart, King's Landing. If the dead come, let them find frozen bones to gnaw." Daenerys's voice cooled the air. "Refuse this truce and I will burn your gates, tear down your palace, and free your people from fear. The people want bread and beds, not dragonfire," Cersei retorted. "But do as you will. Every child you incinerate will haunt your reign." Jon's temper sparked. "And every child turned white will haunt yours." Jaime's golden hand clinked on sword belt. He glanced at Cersei, eyes weary. She ignored him. "This parley is ended," she declared. She turned, but paused as Oberyn stepped forward, spear but striking earth. "I have waited half my life to stand where I could reach you without walls," he said softly. "Your monster Gregor is dead, yet you wear his crimes as proudly as a crown. Elia's blood cries out every night the moon rises. Today I answer." Cersei laughed, a brittle sound. "Do you challenge a queen? Shall I send another mountain to crush you?" "You already did." Oberyn's gaze flicked to the towering knight in black armor behind her ranks. Ser Robert Strong, Qyburn's pet corpse, visor hiding a rotted face. "But this time I brought poison enough." The mountain stepped forward. 2 Kingsguard flanked. Jaime's hand shot out. "Enough. Cersei, we leave." But Oberyn had drawn a slender dagger no longer than a child's forearm, its glassy blade shimmering oily violet. "Poison forged of basilisk blood and manticore venom," he murmured. "It burns through plate, bone, and sin." Qyburn hissed. Cersei's eyes widened. She took a half-step back. Jon's hand rested on Longclaw, uncertain whether to restrain or assist. At length Oberyn sheathed the dagger and smiled a serpent's smile. "Keep your monster, Cersei. I would rather slay you with mercy than pleasure, by showing you the coming night devours queens and beasts alike." He turned away. Cersei's cheeks flamed scarlet, but her voice died amid the creak of leather as the mountain loomed to follow. The parley dissolved. Both sides retreated to camps on opposite banks of tension. Dawn the dividing blade, one edge tempered by duty, the other by pride. Jon found Oberyn by torchlit trench later, adjusting dragonbone rings. "You nearly doomed our truce," Jon said. "There was no truce," Oberyn replied. "Only brinksmanship. She will not yield until dragged screaming from her throne, or until something she loves more than power compels her." Jon frowned. "She loves nothing." "Precisely." Jon surveyed the dark city, towers like fangs against stars. "Tomorrow we break her walls." "No," Oberyn murmured. "Tonight we slip through them." He produced a folded parchment sealed with a fingerprint of blue wax. Arya's sign. Within was a map of sewer grates beneath the Red Keep, old smuggling routes once used by Varys. "Your sister has already found the path. We give her 2 hours. Then we storm the gates while she opens a postern from inside." Jon closed his eyes, recalling Arya's promise. "I will wear the knight's face." He nodded. Across camp, Daenerys stood atop a small hill, Drogon coiled behind her. Tyrion approached, holding a flask. "Many kings thought they ruled after victory," Tyrion said quietly. "Few understood they were ruled by aftermath." Daenerys did not answer, watching orange sparks float from burning ships in the harbor. "If I burn that city," she whispered, "I save the living from the dead, yet destroy what I came to protect." "Then win without fire," Tyrion urged. She laid a hand on Drogon's scaled flank. "Dragons answer only to flame." "Perhaps," Tyrion said, "but sometimes a whisper guides the flame better than a gale." He touched her shoulder, turned to leave. "Whisper wisely, my queen." Moonless midnight cloaked the river in pitch. Arya Stark moved through tunnels beneath the Red Keep, feet silent on damp brick, lithe as shadow. She wore no mask tonight, only her own face, pale and intent. Needle rested at her hip, but in her hand she held a small glass vial of obsidian dust prepared by Dornish alchemists. At the postern ladder, a single gold cloak slouched. A flick of wrist, dust in his eyes. He spasmed, choked, and slid to the floor. Arya drifted past, unbarred the heavy iron bolts. On the plain, Jon's horns sounded once. Mounted spearmen surged toward the walls. Cersei's scorpion swiveled, loosing iron bolts into darkness, but no dragon came. Instead, unsullied pressed ladders while Vale Knights thundered at the gates. At the mud gate, explosions of green wildfire roared, Qyburn's final gambit. Yet Grey Worm's ranks advanced through smoke, shields raised, phalanx unbroken. Then Arya's postern door yawned open. Northmen poured through narrow tunnels, storming halls where Lannister guards gaped. Ser Robert Strong blocked a corridor, greatsword swinging. Brienne met him, Oathkeeper clanging on blackened blade. Sparks hissed as steel bit steel. The mountain's backhand hurled Brienne against a column. Ribs cracked. He lifted sword for killing stroke but froze. Oberyn's dagger buried in a gap at his neck, poison already bubbling beneath blackened steel. The mountain staggered, helm sliding. Oberyn twisted the blade and whispered, "Elia's kiss." The giant crashed, convulsing. In the throne room, Cersei paced before the Iron Throne, wildfire lamps flickering green shadows across ornate steel. Jaime entered, sword unsheathed. "The city is lost," he said softly. Cersei's eyes glittered madness. "Then let it burn. You will die with it." Jaime advanced. For a heartbeat, brother and sister faced each other, histories binding them like chains. Cersei lifted a dagger, Valyrian, slender, shining. Jaime's gold hand caught her wrist. Steel clattered. He drew her close, tears glimmering. Outside, the tower windows trembled with distant detonations. Steps echoed. Daenerys strode through smoke, dressed in black scaled mail. Drogon's roar reverberated beyond shattered doors. Jon entered behind her, Longclaw red with battle. Cersei jerked from Jaime's hold, backing against the throne's knives. Daenerys's voice rang. "Your reign ends. Bend the knee and stand with us against the dead, or perish for nothing." Cersei's gaze darted to the soaring vaults, perhaps seeking wildfire caches, perhaps ghosts. At last her knees bent, not in surrender but in faltering strength. She sagged, crown slipping. Jaime knelt beside her, whispered something only siblings could share. When he rose, tears streaked ash-coated cheeks. "She yields," he said. "The city is yours." Daenerys's shoulders eased. She glanced at Jon. He stepped forward, lifted crown from broken hair, offered to Daenerys. She accepted, then, in a gesture that silenced the throne room's tumult, placed the crown in Jon's hands. "Share it with me," she said. "Ice and fire together." Jon hesitated, but before reply a wind howled. The throne room's ancient shutters banged inward, scattering ash. A cold as deep as midwinter swept in, snuffing torches. Jon's heart clenched. He knew that chill. From northern skies, a horn blast echoed, a warning carried impossibly far. Ravens erupted, crying doom.
Danenreis met Jon's kees.
"Winter marches," she breathed. Oberyn limped into the hall, bloodied. "Ravens from White Harbor. The wall has fallen." Silence. Then Jon lifted his face, voice calm as the grave. "Then our true war begins now." In that ruined hall, throne unclaimed, crown gleaming in shared hands, the alliance forged by Viper and Wolf, Dragon and Direwolf, resolved its purpose. Not conquest, but dawn. And beyond broken ramparts, night gathered strength, a tide of silent footprints pressing south toward embers of human pride. Ash settled over King's Landing in drifting veils like exhausted snow, muffling each clang of hammer and cry of wounded baritone. The city breathed smoke through shattered gates, but it still breathed. No dragonfire had gutted the winding streets of Flea Bottom, and the bells of the Great September, whatever faith they told now, remained intact enough to chime a mournful warning. Dawn had come, and dawn demanded rebuilding before night reclaimed it. The Iron Throne sat acanth beneath the torn vaults of the throne room, its barbed silhouette etched against dim light pouring through gouged stone. But few had time to marvel at a seat unoccupied. The clamor of preparation drowned politics for the first time in living memory. Oberyn Martell strode through the Red Keep's eastern corridor, boots crunching shards of green glass that had once lined an alcove of ornamental wildfire lamps. The bitter tang of burned pitch clung to his nostrils, but beneath it he caught another scent. Parchment and wax, freshly melted, as scribes sealed ravens bound for every corner of Westeros. He halted where the messages were stacked, a trestle table crowded with scrolls penned in urgent hands. One bore his own sigil, the Sun and Spear, addressed to Prince Doran in Sunspear. Another, sealed with the Direwolf, pledged Jon Snow's gratitude to Lady Mormont for dispatching 200 bear-cloaked riders to garrison Tumbleton. A third, stamped with the three-headed dragon, invited the Lords Paramount of the Reach and the Westerlands to the Council of Dawn that would convene in the Dragon Pit 3 days hence. "Will they come, do you think?" Tyrion Lannister's dry voice sounded to Oberyn's left as the hand approached, brushing ash from his black doublet. "The Westerlands may be too busy counting coffers and missing lions." "They will come," Oberyn murmured, selecting his raven scroll and flicking wax flecks from the seal. "The world has shifted under their feet, and men crave purchase when the earth opens." He glanced sideways. Tyrion's eyes were sunken, cheeks hollow with sleepless nights, yet purpose glittered there. "How fare your queen's dragons?" "Restless," Tyrion replied. "Regal circles Blackwater Bay as though looking for something to scorch. Drogon shadows Daenerys wherever she walks, roaring at any torch he dislikes. And Viserion," the dwarf exhaled, "Viserion mourns the wall. He perched on the ramparts of the Gate of the Gods all night, keening. I did not know dragons could cry." "Everything that lives can cry," Oberyn said quietly. "We will find cause to laugh again, too. Perhaps when winter has ended." Tyrion huffed. Optimism from the Red Viper? I fear the apocalypse truly is nigh. He extended a small parchment. A list of houses that have sworn provisional allegiance. Tarleys, Merryweathers, Fossaways, about half the Florence. The other half still bristle at dragon rule. He gestured to the table. You see why ravens must fly quickly. Oberyn tapped the list, eyes narrowing at one name missing. The Lannisters? At present, Casterly Rock is a fortress without a master, Tyrion answered. Edmure Tully holds Jaime in his care while Cersei... He glanced down the corridor toward the Tower of the Hand, where a queen-turned-prisoner occupied Maegor's holdfast under close watch. Cersei contemplates a future measured in chains. Her life may yet serve dawn, Oberyn said, voice chill. A lioness's roar carries south and west. Perhaps. Tyrion's shoulders sagged. Meanwhile, my brother stands trial for reasons the world may never grasp, and I write letters begging men who hate dragons to join forces with them. He managed a crooked smile. Not my finest day. Oberyn laid a hand on the dwarf's shoulder. Fine days are luxuries of peace. We fight for the chance to waste them again. Tyrion smirked. Spare me your Dornish philosophy, Prince. Save it for Jon Snow. He listens to madmen. Jon Snow listens to ghosts. Oberyn's gaze drifted through a cracked window to the bustling courtyard below. And ghosts often speak truths men fear. In the Sept scriptorium, Jon Snow sat hunched over a map spread across an altar once dedicated to the Mother's Mercy. Candles guttered, their wax pooling over marble veins. Each flicker cast the map's ink rivers and mountain ridges into trembling motion. Next to him, Davos Seaworth adjusted his wooden fingers, freshly carved to replace those Stannis had lopped, and pointed at the next narrow causeway. If we fortify Moat Cailin with dragonglass traps, Davos said, we could slow the dead's advance should they breach the Ironswood line. Gives the Reach more time to harvest grain, and perhaps lets us move refugees south. Jon's eyes were shadowed hollows above unshaven cheeks. How many days until the dead reach last hearth? Ravens say 4, maybe 5, Davos answered. Umber riders are evacuating holdfasts, but winter roads swallow carts. We'll have to meet them on open ground, Jon muttered. He traced a gloved finger west of the King's Road. The Long Barrow has a ridge we could anchor a line against. He leaned back, grimaced. But we need every house we've roused south of Moat Cailin marching tonight. Davos's brow furrowed. Marching at night in snow is death in itself. So is delay, Jon said quietly. The Night King commands a horde that grows with every corpse. If we give him another castle's graveyard, we gift him 2,000 fresh soldiers of ice. Davos sighed. You sound like Stannis whispering over his painted table. You're right, but know this, even a king cannot outrun winter. I am no king. Jon rolled the map, tied it with twine. I'm a watchman. Davos chuckled without mirth. Watchmen rarely command dragons. Jon's eyes flicked to the high arched doorway where footsteps approached. Daenerys Targaryen entered, cloak of obsidian scales floating behind her. Snow crusted the hem. She had been on the ramparts again, scanning the skies. Her violet eyes settled first on Jon, then on Davos with a nod. The Dornish sandships sail on the morning tide, she reported. Unsullied legionaries will march north by road. Tyrion believes we will have 60,000 spears within a fortnight. She removed dragonglass gauntlets, revealing calloused palms. How many do we need? Jon answered without hesitation. More than we'll ever gather. He motioned to the parchment. We move the North's reserves to the Long Barrow. Then we pray the wall's breach funnels the dead into a narrow corridor where dragonfire can reach them. Daenerys frowned. Use my dragons at night, against ice? Their fire will light the heavens. We risk being targets. Jon met her gaze. Dragons are our only edge, but they must strike at the walkers, not the whites. He glanced at Davos. I want dragonglass ballista bolts. If a white walker shatters, the dead linked to it collapse. Easy as forging moonlight, Davos muttered. But we'll try. Daenerys stepped closer to Jon, voice gentling. You have not slept since we arrived. I will sleep when the dead do, he replied. She laid a hand on Longclaw's pommel. Rest strengthens steel, Jon. He covered her hand with his. I rested enough during 4 years of false peace. The moment stretched. Finally, Jon released her fingers. I ride at dusk for Harrenhal to rally Riverlords. I need you to stay here, marshal the dragons, and lead, she finished. Yes, I know. Her mouth tilted. But do not forget, dire wolf. Dragons follow me because I fly with them. When the final battle comes, I will be in the sky. Jon nodded, though caution shadowed his eyes. Just be alive when dawn breaks. She smiled, fierce. You too. By late afternoon, the King's Road trembled beneath hooves as a vanguard of northern outriders galloped south in a flurry of ice crystals and steaming breath. Ghost sprinted ahead, white form weaving between horses, lingering near Jon's destrier as though tethered by invisible chain. The sun dipped crimson, dying clouds blood rose, and the wind carried scents of distant carrion. Somewhere beyond the horizon, the Night King's army shambled unseen, quiet as Glacier Creek, unstoppable as tide. Jon rode with Beric Dondarrion, whose single eye glimmered beneath a ragged hood. Every death the dead bring feeds their chill, Beric said, voice rough with smoke and resurrection. We must fight where the living can burn their dead quickly. Harrenhal's fallen towers could serve, Jon replied. Huge hearths still smolder beneath half-collapsed halls. They say the castle is cursed, Beric noted. I've no time for curses. Jon spurred his horse. But I have need for walls. At Harrenhal, walls of black iron and fused stone loomed jagged against the night, like teeth of some vast charred beast. Fires burned in cracked courtyards where hundreds of Riverlanders huddled inside makeshift tents. Lord Tyto's Blackwood greeted Jon wearing a fur-lined breastplate hammered with ravens. Our scouts report torches along the Green Fork, the Lord said as they walked through echoing vaults. Not living torches. Blue fire. Jon's jaw stiffened. The walkers crossed the river already? Yes, and any man they kill stands again within the hour. Beric exhaled white mist. Then we hold the fork, or the trident becomes their highway to the heartlands. Jon eyed the courtyard's width, counting archways. We dig fire trenches here, fill them with oil and pitch, archers on the walls with dragonglass arrows. We stockpile the dead's corpses for burning at dawn. No burial mounds, pyres only. Blackwood grimaced. The phrase once left corpses here for crows. We rebuild what they destroyed only to make funeral pyres again. Better ashes than whites. Jon strode onward, issuing orders. Horns signaled riders outside. Lady Mallister's lancers arrived, bearing barrels of tar. The Brotherhood without banners brought wagons of arrows tipped in obsidian. A detachment of Dothraki screeched into the outer bailey, braids adorned with bells that chimed doom. Above all, Harrenhal's skeletal towers groaned. Not from wind alone, but from tremors in the earth. Some muttered dragons nested beneath the ruined hearths. Others whispered ghosts of Harrenhal. Jon ignored superstitions. His ghosts walked in daylight, snarling. On the rampart, he found Arya leaning on the parapet, eyes scrutinizing far-distant treelines. She wore a cloak of charcoal wool over boiled leather jerkin, hair tied back. The winter sun painted her face in bone-white lines. Jon joined her. For a while they watched drifting cinders from cookfires swirl like ember snowflakes. Brienne survived? He asked softly. She will, Arya said. Maester says 2 cracked ribs, bruised lung. She's annoyed she won't ride for days. Jon gazed east, where campfires dotted the riverside like fallen stars. We'll need her sword soon enough. Arya's fingers toyed with needle's hilt. We'll need every sword. She swallowed hard, voice thinning. I saw the Night King's army at the walls fall, only in glimpses, but, Jon, it was endless. A sea of death. I know. He placed an arm around her shoulders. But seas break upon rocks. We'll be the rocks. She nodded against his chest, then whispered, I killed the mountain. Jon blinked. Oberyn stood by, he recalled. I found a chink in his helm, Arya murmured, eyes distant. Slid a blade of Valyrian stiletto through. I felt him die. Her voice shook. It didn't feel like vengeance, Jon. It felt like nothing. Jon squeezed her. The dead take things from us long before they kill us. We hold on to what remains. Arya breathed deep. Then we'll hold. 2 nights later, watchers atop Harrenhal's parapets beheld a shivering glow on the northern horizon. Blue-white, flickering like ghostly auroras near the ground. Drums suddenly pounded below, horns blew. Jon rushed to the walls, cloak billowing. In the moon's wan light he saw them. A shimmering line of figures emerging from forest gloom. Rank upon rank, armor rimed with frost, eyes blazing nephrite. The dead had come to feed. He turned to his officers. Light the trenches. Fire sprang across ditches outside the curtain wall. Roaring curtains that cast weird shadows over skeletal towers. The dead advanced still, wading into flame like men into surf. Skin charred, clothing ignited, yet they pressed on, driven by an icy will. Dragon horns wailed. From the black clouds above, wings thundered, Drogon, Regal, and Viserion diving like dark comets. Fire burst from their throats, turning no man's land into a hell's cape. Whites shriveled in radiant heat. Yet amid the blaze, tall figures strode unharmed. White walkers wielding crystal spears. Frost rippled outward from their steps, snuffing flames. Bolts whistled. Dragonglass arrowheads shattered one walker's skull. Its body exploded into shards. The whites linked to it collapsed lifeless. Men cheered, but the Night King himself appeared on a ridge of rubble, riding a monstrous undead spider once out of northern legend. Blue fire crackled beneath its chitinous legs, freezing puddles to mirror glass. He raised a spear of dusk-pale ice and hurled it skyward. It struck Viserion's wing. Shattered bones sprayed frost. The dragon screeched, spiraling into a half-collapsed tower which collapsed beneath his weight. Jon's heart clenched. On the battlements he saw Daenerys upon Drogon's back, hair streaming silver in firelight. She wheeled toward Viserion's fall, but Jon signaled horns. Keep striking walkers. Drogon ascended, banking as Regal followed, raining gouts of flame on the Night King's guard. Blue javelins arced upward. One grazed Regal's flank, leaving a trail of crystalline blood sparkling in the dark. Down below, Barrack's flaming sword slashed through a white giant's sinew. Dothraki rocks blazed with fire oil, carving paths. Unsullied shields locked as phalanxes repelled icy claws. Yet the wave pressed inexorable. Steps away from Jon, Lady Lyanna Mormont, face streaked with soot, commanded archers, her voice shrill as a hunting hawk. Aim for the blue-eyed tall ones. Drop them and their dead fall. Jon descended the inner stairs, blade drawn. In the lower bailey, a breach appeared, frost cracking stone as whites clambered over toppled ramp. Jon met them, Longclaw singing, each swing severing heads that rolled like candle stubs across ice. But numbers built, bodies pressed. He heard Arya's distinct war cry behind, then glimpsed her dart atop a wagon, leaping down with needle-precise stabs to walker throats. Ghost lunged at undead wolves scavenged from Winterfell's kennels long ago, ripping with savage fury. The Night King advanced to within bowshot, spider legs clacking over burning debris, blue eyes fixed on Jon with endless contempt. He raised another spear. Jon muttered a quick prayer to every god he could recall, old, new, drowned, fiery, and charged through clots of whites toward the wall's breach. At that instant Regal, despite wounded wing, plunged from the gloom, mouth yawning, unleashing a torrent of emerald fire. Dragon flame mingled with wildfire brewed by Tyrion's alchemists. The blaze engulfed the spider and rider in incandescent fury. Ice hissed, exploded into steam. A shockwave rattled Harrenhal's bones. The spider crumpled, melted. The Night King vanished in blinding conflagration. Silence fell. Then whites around Jon shuddered as if struck by unseen force. Their eyes dimmed, limbs slackened, bodies toppling like slaughtered puppets. Across the battlefield dead collapsed in waves, until none remained standing. Men cheered, though disbelieving. Jon stared at the eerie stillness, chest heaving. Beric limped nearer, one arm drenched in blood, torchlight reflecting disbelief. "Is it done?" Jon shook his head, gaze roving the ash-swirled air. The fire where the Night King fell had banks of steam billowing upward. Shapes flickered inside. Embers or something else. Ghosts snarled, hackles rising. From within the vortex of heat stepped the Night King, his armor aglow with residual flame, yet flesh unburned. Frost crystallized instantly on the melted rubble. He clutched a new spear, grown perhaps from his own essence, and fixed his gaze on Jon again. No mocking smile, no emotion, only ancient, implacable purpose. Terror prickled Jon's spine. He set his feet, raised Longclaw. The Night King hurled the spear. A streak of silver and red intercepted. Oberyn Martell, having scaled a shattered wall, thrust his serpent-headed spear into the trajectory. The ice weapon shattered, shards spinning. Oberyn landed cat-like near Jon. "Viper's venom bites cold too," he said through clenched teeth. The obsidian-edged spear he carried steamed where bits of ice hissed. The Night King conjured a second spear, but this time Daenerys swooped low, Drogon's mouth opening in a furnace roar. Jon shouted, "Aim the dragon at him, not the horde." Flame poured. The Night King lifted his weapon. Yet as heat enveloped him, Arya leapt from a crumbling parapet behind, Valyrian dagger flashing. She struck at his spine, blade driving through gaps of icemail. For a heartbeat nothing happened. Then cracks spiderwebbed across the Night King's torso, white lines seething blue within. He turned, eyes meeting Arya's, brief shock flickering. She twisted the blade, obsidian edge grinding. An explosion of fracture burst. The Night King shattered into brittle shards, scattering like frost-struck glass. Silence swallowed the courtyard. A hush rippled outward. Whites froze mid-lurch, then slumped dead again for the second, final time. Shadows of walkers across the battlefield fractured into snow dust, drifting away on a wind suddenly free. Drogon's flame ceased. Smoke spiraled. Jon stared at Arya, who gasped for breath, fingers white-knuckled around the dagger's hilt. He pulled her into fierce embrace. Oberyn leaned on his spear, chest heaving. "The ghost of the Viper strikes swift," he murmured, eyes shining. Every man and woman who could still stand raised blades skyward. Northmen, Dornish, Unsullied, Dothraki, Reachmen, and an echoing roar erupted that shook half-ruined Harrenhal down to its cursed foundations. But victory's euphoria quickly dulled to grim inventory of loss. Pyres were built out of charred barricades. Bodies, friend and foe alike, heaped upon them. Dragons circled, keening mournful songs. In the pre-dawn haze, Jon climbed a watchtower. The faintest silver glimmer brightened the eastern rim. Frost still coated his beard, but for the first time in moons the wind did not cut like knives. Daenerys joined him, hand brushing his. "You said dawn would come," she whispered. "It's only a beginning," Jon replied. She followed his gaze across smoking fields dotted with blackened corpses. "What remains to fight now? Cersei is captive. The Night King is gone. The realm remains," Jon said. "Famine, plague, 1,000 grievances we set aside for war will rise again." He squeezed her fingers. "We built an alliance across fire and ice. Now we must build a peace." Below, survivors battered banners free of soot and raised them high. Sun and spear beside direwolf, three-headed dragon beside black stag, silver trout, golden rose, green seahorse. A tapestry of houses rarely seen on one field since Aegon's landing. And across their faces glowed wonder. The war for dawn might be won, but the forging of day lay ahead. Oberyn arrived, cloak scorched, one brow singed away. He grinned. "I intend to celebrate by drinking every last vintage Tywin Lannister hoarded." Daenerys' laugh was brittle but real. "Your claim on the wine cellars is granted, Prince." Jon surveyed the horizon. "First we bury our dead. Then we march home, north and south alike." Daenerys tilted her head. "Home." The word tasted foreign. "Where our people wait," Jon said. And the Iron Throne? Oberyn asked. Jon looked down at his gloved hands, then at Daenerys. Let it stand empty a while. We have thrones to mend in hearts before we fill ones of steel. Daenerys's lips curved. Perhaps a shared regency? Dragon and wolf both guiding the realm. Or perhaps, Jon murmured, a council of all banners, chosen by their folk, ruling until children be. Orn today speak of kings and queens only in stories. Oberyn chuckled. You dream boldly, the nobility will resist. Then let them. Jon squared shoulders. The dawn belongs to the living, not to crowns. Daenerys considered him, eyes soft. If you ask me to share that burden, I will. She held out her hand. Jon took it. Below, the pyres were lit. Twin rivers of flame sweeping across the field, devouring death, giving it to wind. Smoke spiraled into the awakening sky, where pale gold light spread like slow, unfurling hope, painted ruins with promise rather than despair. Cinders drifted upward, and for one heartbeat they resembled snow. But this snow burned away in sunlight, leaving only warmth. Arya watched from a rampart with Sansa at her side. Sansa whispered, "Do you remember Father's words? The lone wolf dies, but the pack survives." Arya nodded. "We are the pack." Ghost padded forward, pressing against Jon's leg as though claiming this dawn for wolves. Drogon trumpeted overhead, wings slashing daylight. The people below raised eyes, and in their collective gaze shimmered something bright as dragonfire and rare as summer belief. Jon raised his sword, not in victory, but salutation. Around him, banners dipped. Daenerys lifted her hand, palm facing the crowd, acknowledging each house present. Oberyn leaned on his spear, head tilted skyward, inhaling smoke and cold air as if it were the sweetest perfume. And so the war for the dawn ended not with a crown placed upon a brow, nor with trumpets heralding a new empire, but with a promise whispered into rising sun. Never again would living hands yield the realm to darkness born of pride and silence. Steel would be reforged, walls rebuilt, fields resown, but more than stone and harvests, hearts would need shaping. That labor would be longer, and bloodless only if men learned to carry each other's burdens as they had this night. Yet for a breath in time, as first rays crested Harrenhal's blasted towers, the world stood poised and quiet, as though listening for a new song. Jon Snow, Aegon Targaryen, closed his eyes, imagining Ned's steady voice guiding him, Lyanna's laughter echoing. He felt Elia Martell's justice stirring in Oberyn's weary stance, felt Mance Rayder's defiance in Tormund's distant whoops beyond the walls, felt Osha's hope and Shireen's innocent joy in the kissing warmth on his cheeks. All the lost were threads in dawn's tapestry. He opened his eyes. Beside him, Daenerys exhaled, dragonfire glinting in her irises like twin suns. "What now, Jon?" "Now," he said. "We begin the story no bard has yet imagined." He glanced down at Arya, who saluted with her dagger, at Sansa, who lifted a roll of parchments, laws waiting for ink, at Davos, who studied broken walls with a carpenter's eye, at Beric, who collapsed in relief, final life having served its purpose, at Lyanna Mormont, already berating a towering Dothraki for dropping a shield, at thousands of others whose names history might never recall yet, whose courage had carved this delicate future. Jon turned his gaze to the fledgling sun climbing free of night's tattered shroud. Light spilled across the ruins, igniting dust motes like tiny stars. He breathed deep. The realm was wounded, weary, haunted, but alive. He tightened his grip on Daenerys' hand, and they walked forward into day.